Hi everyone, this is Don Farber with Sage Alerts and Workflow. I'd like to welcome you very much to this presentation. I do apologize for my somewhat nasal tone to my voice. I am getting over a cold, but hopefully my voice will hold out for the entire duration of this session. If you do have any questions as we go through today's session, please type them into the chat box and we'll do our best to leave time at the end to answer those. This presentation is being recorded, so we'll be glad to give you a copy of it also upon conclusion. So let's get right to it. What is Sage Alerts and Workflow? Well, the best analogy that I can give you is that it's like a smoke detector for your business data. Because like a smoke detector, the purpose of Sage Alerts and Workflow is to monitor the data that sits within your Sage 300 and also other business applications, looking for critical, time-sensitive conditions of data, such as low inventory levels, overdue invoices, a client who's changed their buying habits, and notify you about those activities, and at the same time, take some kind of proactive action in response to those conditions. And that's why the application is not simply called Sage Alerts, but Sage Alerts and Workflow. Now, it is true that the #1 use of the application is sending alerts. So let's get into those top 10 uses of Sage Alerts and Workflow amongst Sage 300 clients. The first of those situations, and I just referred to it, is using Sage Alerts and Workflow to monitor for stock shortages. Now, I always like to encourage people to use Sage Alerts and Workflow to let you know about things that are going on before they become a problem. And that's, again, like that smoke detector analogy. So perhaps instead of sending an alert once an item drops below its minimum stock or reorder point, rather you have Sage Alerts and Workflow send alerts when stock is within 10, 15, or 20% of its reorder level. As you can see with the slide in front of you right now, those alerts can be sent out via a number of different methods, email, of course, being the most popular of those. And here we've got a good example of an HTML-generated email message by Sage Alerts and Workflow about items that are at or below their reorder level. One of the most common uses of alerts and Workflow is to notify people about shipments. Now, hopefully those notifications are letting people know that their shipment is coming, it's on its way, or simply a confirmation to ensure that a customer has received their shipment. But in fact, daily life intervenes and sometimes shipments are delayed. You know, what I've learned in over 30 years in the software and business industry is that clients understand that delays happen. What clients don't understand, what they don't accept, is when you don't tell them about a shipment that has been delayed. So in this regard, I'd like to point out that this is a good example of using Sage Alerts and Workflow, not just to notify your internal people about things that are going on, but also to proactively reach out to your customers, your suppliers, your vendors, and let them know about activities that are occurring that impact them. So a simple alert message, whether it's sent to a customer's email or perhaps their cell phone, letting them know about a shipment that has been delayed. Use number 3, this is actually multiple uses. The most common uses of Sage Alerts and Workflow is to automate many of the steps in the sales process, even from delivering an original quote to a prospect or customer, to then sending an order confirmation or acknowledgement after an order's been placed. We've already discussed sending updates on shipping status. But then Alerts and Workflow goes beyond that to automatically generate and deliver your standard forms and documents like invoices and customer statements. If it's currently someone's job to manually create these documents, these invoices, these statements, if you're currently still taking those and printing them out, stuffing them into envelopes and sending them via snail mail to your customers, certainly consider automating this process and using Sage Alerts and Workflow to do so. These documents, like invoices and statements, can be sent out in whatever format you require, whether it's PDF, HTML, Microsoft Word, or other format. Fourth use, Reducing bad debt. In fact, this is the #1 most common use of Sage alerts and workflow amongst all ERP clients today, including, of course, Sage 300 users. I mentioned how alerts and workflow can automatically generate and deliver forms and documents like an invoice that we see here as an example when an order is placed. But the sad fact is that not all customers pay on time. And so organizations spend a lot of time and resources following up with delinquent customers. Very often an AR aging report is dumped on someone's desk, that's someone, usually a person in accounting, and then that person is responsible to send emails or make phone calls to the appropriate customers and let them know they've got overdue invoices. If this process is currently being done manually, I certainly encourage you to think about freeing that person up for tasks that uniquely require the service of a human brain and automating this process so that you can set up Sage alerts and workflow to automatically send out payment reminders, whether it's as payments are coming due or, of course, as payments become past due, 7, 15, 30, 60, and more days past due. Have Sage alerts and workflow not only notify the corresponding customer that they've got one or more invoices that are past due, but have Sage alerts and workflow automatically regenerate the original invoice form and deliver that to the customer as part of that reminder. Let's go back to talk a little bit more about using Sage alerts and workflow to monitor stock levels. If you're in a kind of business where you have inventory that has an expiration date that is time sensitive, using alerts and workflow to monitor that stock, to let you know about those items that should be pushed or else they're going to have to be written off, is exceptionally important. In fact, we can push that out and really make a global statement here about how Sage alerts and workflow can look at any and all dates within your Sage 300 application. And if you think about it, there are a lot of dates, from expiration dates, due dates, delivery dates, invoice dates, contract expiration dates, lease dates, and the list goes on. Alerts and workflow can send out notification when those dates are being approached and when they've been passed, and passed by more than X days. In this particular example, we're actually showing an alert message sent by Sage alerts and workflow about parts whose on-hand level is actually above their stock maximum. And one of the things I like to point out about Sage alerts and workflow is that in the alerts that it can send, they don't have to be text-based alerts. They can be graphical in nature as well, because truly sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. So instead of sending someone a long email or a multiple page report, let's have alerts and workflow generate a nice looking bar chart, pie chart, line chart, and deliver that to the appropriate people. One of the lesser known but more popular uses of Sage alerts and workflow by customers who've been using the application for a while is to use Sage alerts and workflow to uncover and communicate changes in customer buying habits. In most businesses, you have customers who are repeat customers of yours. They buy from you month after month, usually at a certain level. Sage alerts and workflow can monitor those trends automatically. And in fact, I'll be showing you one of these events when we jump into the application a little bit later on today. Sage alerts and workflow can tell you about customers who have stopped buying from you. Customers whose sales perhaps for the month just ended represents a significant decrease, as in this particular example, a decrease of at least 30% over that customer's average sale, that monthly average being based upon perhaps the last 3, 6, or 9 months of history. Now, in this particular slide that I'm showing, instead of showing the actual alert message, what I wanted to show you is an example of how you can create that alert message within Sage alerts and workflow. And again, we'll be going into the application so you can see a live demo. But I wanted to start off by showing you this, because as you can see, it's really pretty easy to configure and customize your alert messages. It's simply a combination of the fields of data from your ERP application, like a salesperson's name, customer name, etc., along with associated hard-coded text. So as we get further into today's session, we get into the application, you'll see you don't have to be a programmer of any sort in order to create or customize your alert messages. If you're in a business whereby you take on projects or jobs for your clients, I think one of the key uses of Sage Alerts and Workflow is to identify jobs that are falling behind time, perhaps are over budget, because you don't want to wait until you've completely used up the budget on a job to discover that, hey, the job's not finished, but our finances are. So using alerts and workflow to do such things as compare the percentage a job is complete with the percentage of budget used up. And if those two tend to vary a bit too much from each other, it's probably wise to notify someone to say, it looks like we're going to run out of time or run out of money on certain jobs. Alerts and workflow is a great tool for keeping you on top of the jobs and projects that you've undertaken for your clients. Let's skip over to talk about the area of purchase orders within your organization. Think about the purchasing process. When you create initially a purchase order, it's for a certain dollar amount. If you're like most organizations, depending upon the amount of that PO, you need to get it reviewed and approved by at least one person and sometimes multiple people. Sage Alerts and Workflow can really help in that process by automatically notifying the appropriate people about POs that require their review and approval. Alerts and Workflow can make sure that those POs don't sit on a person's desk waiting for them to get around to reviewing them and approving them. And then once the PO itself is approved and is cut, Sage Alerts and Workflow can automatically deliver it to the appropriate supplier or vendor. And then, last but certainly not least, Alerts and Workflow can keep an eye on that purchase order and make sure that it gets delivered to you on a timely fashion. If you're expecting a purchase order on a certain date, Alerts and Workflow can automatically reach out to that corresponding vendor or supplier and ask them to confirm that that shipment to you is on time. And of course, Alerts and Workflow can always notify you about those purchase order shipments that are currently overdue for delivery. Right. One use of Sage Alerts and Workflow that often goes initially undetected by organizations is using the application to look for bad data, missing data, or simply exceptions to accepted data conditions. For example, in this particular scenario, we've actually got Sage Alerts and Workflow looking through your inventory items to look for duplicates. And in this case, duplicates are being described as items that have the exact same name or description, but have a different item number. But you know, whether it's looking for duplicates, looking for customers that are missing certain key data, such as phone numbers or phone numbers with an incorrect number of digits, looking for orders that are missing key components, the more that you can do to improve the quality of the data within Sage 300, the more productivity and profitability will result. You're not spending time having to go back and fix bad data because it's gone undetected. The final use here is a little bit of a special situation. And let me move ahead to the slide because I think it does as good a job as I can do in terms of describing this. Here we've got an example of alert from Sage Alerts and Workflow that's actually showing 3 different aspects of business transactions, looking at monthly sales, looking at products that are not selling well, looking at today's order totals. Alerts and Workflow can look at all aspects of your business. So not just within Sage 300, but if you happen to be using add-on solutions to Sage 300 for sales tax, for document management, for barcoding, Sage Alerts and Workflow, it's not limited to just monitoring data within Sage 300. It can look at your Sage 300 add-ons. It can also look at your other business applications, even if they are from software developers other than Sage software. Okay, so I think you've got a good idea for the variety of ways that Sage Alerts and Workflow is being used by Sage 300 clients. At this point, I'd like to bounce out of the application, bounce out of my PowerPoint and bounce into the Sage Alerts and Workflow solution itself. Let me grab myself a quick sip of water and we'll continue. Okay, so Sage Alerts and Workflow. Let's talk about a few of the general characteristics of the application before we get into our demo. Sage Alerts and Workflow is a server-based application. That means you typically install it on just one machine within your IT environment. And that's something key for you to remember. This is not an application that you need to train all of your users on. Again, think about the smoke detector analogy. You're going to take Sage Alerts and Workflow. You're going to install it on just a single machine. You're going to tell it about the applications and modules you want it to monitor. You're going to tell it what to do if and when certain critical, time-sensitive business conditions exist. And then you're going to turn it on and walk away from it. Sage Alerts and Workflow works in a lights-out processing environment. It actually runs via a Windows service. So once you install it, configure it, and turn it on, it literally runs by itself. So how does Sage Alerts and Workflow operate? Well, looking at the application that we have here, well, let me take one step back. I always like to mention the Windows operating systems because folks always ask me what OS are supported by Sage Alerts and Workflow. All Windows operating systems are supported by Sage Alerts and Workflow. And in fact, since we're talking technical here just for a moment, let me also add that Sage Alerts and Workflow stores its own data in a Microsoft SQL Server environment, just like your Sage 300. All right. So, as you can see here in my Sage Alerts and Workflow, I'm having it monitor a number of different modules within Sage 300 from accounts payable, receivable, inventory, and so on. I'm having Sage Alerts and Workflow look into my Sage 300 system to look for trend analysis. Then I'm also having Sage Alerts and Workflow monitor conditions in a couple of additional applications, my CRM application and also my Human Resources app. Again, if you're using additional applications from outside of the Sage world, you can have Sage Alerts and Workflow monitor those conditions as well. Also, I mentioned earlier in my presentation when we were looking at alert messages, all of those alerts were typically being sent via email. And email is the most popular alert delivery method in Sage Alerts and Workflow, but it's by no means the only alert delivery method. Certainly, sending text messages to your cell phone is a very popular delivery method that's included with Sage Alerts and Workflow. But there's a third very popular alert delivery method. We call it webcasting or dashboard alerts. This is the ability for Alerts and Workflow to dynamically create and dynamically update web pages with alert details. After all, if you've got clients who are past due in terms of paying for their invoices, wouldn't it be nice for someone in accounting to have a web page up that says, here's a list of all the clients who are currently past due, or here's a list of all the invoices that are past due. And as those invoices get paid off, those clients are automatically removed from those web lists. And as new clients become past due, they're automatically added. We refer to those as alert dashboards. And a number of them, about a dozen or so that you can see here, come with the application. By the way, everything that I'm showing you here today in terms of the pre-configured events for Sage 300, these all come with the application at no additional cost. Okay, so let's pick on a specific event. And since I know using Sage Alerts and Workflow to monitor invoices that are coming due is the most popular scenario, let's pick something from our receivables branch. I do want to mention that out-of-the-box alerts and workflow comes with roughly 55 pre-configured business conditions that it monitors for within the Sage 300 application. As I said, all of the events that you see here today come with the application. So let's look at using Sage Alerts and Workflow to send out reminders about invoices that are coming due within the next 7 days. Now, every event within Sage Alerts and Workflow consists of up to 5 components, and you can see them listed here. Starting with Sage Alerts and Workflow telling me whether this event is currently active and how often are we checking for this event's conditions. In this case, this event is running every day at 9 o'clock in the morning. As you can imagine, different events have different frequencies based upon the time sensitivity of the conditions being monitored. So for example, monitoring inventory levels, you might need to monitor more frequently, such as every hour, every few minutes, or even continuously. And contrary to that, looking at trend analysis, well, maybe looking for customer trends once a week, once a month, or maybe even once a quarter would be sufficient. Alerts and Workflow includes all of those frequencies that you can choose from. And by the way, you might notice that this particular event is flagged with something called repeat turned on. What that means is that when this event ran this morning at 9 a.m. and sent out its alerts about invoices coming due, tomorrow, when it runs again at 9 o'clock in the morning, if some of those same invoices are still past due, Alerts and Workflow is going to send another or repeat round of alerts. Now, without question, the most important part of an event is its query or its triggering condition. This query is looking at invoices that are coming due within a certain number of days. I like to point out here that the day number is specified on the event level. This way, I can actually reuse this one triggering condition, we call it a query, within many different events. As you can see, I've got 3 different events looking at invoices that are coming due within 7, 14, and 30 days. This particular event is triggering on just 7 days. Now, whenever I start talking about an events query, people always ask me, well, Don, do I need to be a programmer to create those queries? What if I have certain customers I need to exclude from this logic? Can I do so? So let me show you a little bit of the query designer. But let me start this by saying the following. You don't need to be a programmer to create or customize queries. You don't have to know how to write SQL syntax. All you need to be is familiar with the Sage 300 database schema. In plain English, if you know what data sits where in Sage 300, you have all the expertise you need to create and configure queries. Of course, Sage Alerts and Workflow comes with over 50 pre-configured queries, so you can always use those as a starting point for your additional events. In our case, we're looking for invoices that are coming due, so we are retrieving data from our 3 tables within Sage 300. The table that stores our open invoices, the table that stores information about the customers, and the table that stores information about our salespeople. If you've chosen to retrieve data from more than one table, Alerts and Workflow has a little linking wizard to help you link those tables together. But I'm going to stop next on the Columns tab. This is where you're able to choose the individual fields of data that you want Alerts and Workflow to retrieve from your database, such as the due date for an invoice, the invoice amount itself, whether the invoice has a discount, etc. So you simply pick and choose these fields, and if you want to perform some more sophisticated arithmetic functions, Alerts and Workflow allows you to do so. For example, if you wanted to total all of the overdue invoices per customer, or simply count the number of overdue invoices per customer. Alerts and Workflow also has a calculation wizard that you can leverage to do even more sophisticated calculations. I'm going to jump over to the Filters tab because truly this is the most important part of creating your query or triggering condition. Here, I'm looking for only those invoices that have an amount due that's greater than 0, and those invoices that are coming due within a certain number of days. Now, this second filter is using a calculation that was created using the calculation wizard in Alerts and Workflow to calculate that number of days. But everything here is available in plain English format. All of your conditions, you can do Boolean logic, you can look for conditions 1 and 2, or conditions 3, 4, and 5. You can also, very importantly, use Alerts and Workflow to tell you whenever a field in a database has had its value changed. So for example, we might want to know if a customer's invoice has had its due date changed. Alerts and Workflow can track that. It'll capture both the old value and the new value of any field or fields within the Sage 300 database. If you do like to write your own SQL, we'll actually give you the ability to do so. But personally, I like showing people this SQL tab because this is what you don't have to know what to do. Sage Alerts and Workflow automatically generates all of this lovely SQL syntax for you. And we can always test the results of our query. Let's see if we have any invoices that are coming due within the next 7 days. And the answer is yes, we've got a number of them. And we can review the results here to make sure they're exactly what I expect to receive. So the query, or the triggering mechanism behind an event. Now let's take a look at what we've configured this event to do if and when its conditions have proven true. All of the content that an alert can generate, whether it's an email message, a text message to a cell phone, whether it's regenerating the invoice and sending that off to a customer, or perhaps even generating an AR aging report for the corresponding customer and sending that report to the corresponding sales rep. Those are all considered part of an event's deliverables. And you can see that this event here has a number of deliverables, including an email alert message, fax message. In fact, let's go into our instant message alert and let's customize this alert message. All right, so what we've got here is a very short message saying our invoice, and it's going to show us our invoice number and the amount of X dollars is due on a certain date. Well, maybe we want the original date of the invoice. So let's see if we can find that field. There it is, date of the invoice. So let's just go in here and let's say comma and dated, and let's drop the date of our invoice right there. I see that I probably should have moved things around a little bit, so let's just do that right now. Make this message a little tidier, and let's go back and say invoice number, and then drop this field in there. There we go. So creating or customizing alert messages is as easy as that. Your email alert message can be in plain text or HTML. We provide a library of HTML templates to choose from. But let's move this window over to the left a little bit, because what you'll see here is, in addition to these different alert messages, we've also got Sage Alerts and Workflow generating both a report and a chart. So let's go over to our Reports tab to take a look at those. So let's talk about the report first, because if you think about it, if an invoice is coming due in 7 days, probably the best thing that we could automate would be to have the invoice automatically sent to the corresponding customer. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're actually taking our invoice form right out of Sage 300. We're telling Alerts and Workflow to generate that invoice form in PDF format. Alerts and Workflow is automatically telling this, this crystal report, this invoice form, the invoice number to generate for. And as we'll see in a moment, Alerts and Workflow will then pick up that form and automatically deliver it to the corresponding customer. But at the same time, we're having Alerts and Workflow generate the corresponding invoices that meet this event's conditions. We're also having Alerts and Workflow generate a chart. This particular chart is showing us the total of outstanding invoices per sales rep. You know, let's have a look at that and see what it looks like. So let's go into the chart design module. This is part of Sage Alerts and Workflow, nothing additional that you need to purchase. And I honestly have no idea what data this chart's going to show. It may show us nothing. It may show us something very attractive. It may even show us an error. Let's see what we get. No error. And we can see of all of our sales reps, we can see Bill has customers with pending receivables approaching $1 million. So charts like this can be attached to emails. They can be embedded within email alerts. They can be posted to web pages, however you want them to be distributed. Last thing, before we leave the deliverables of this event, we can see that this event is even picking up a Microsoft Word document, a Word document that in this case instructs customers how they can use an online bill payment method to pay for those invoices that are coming due. All right. So you've had a look at the different alert messages and the content, reports, charts that can be generated. Naturally, the next step is to specify whom we want this content to be delivered to. All recipients of alert content are referred to as subscribers in Alerts and Workflow. This event has 4. The first 2 are considered standard subscribers. In fact, in this case, the first of them is a group of subscribers. These groups are definable by you. I'm notifying everyone in my finance group. I'm notifying them via 2 delivery methods, email and instant message. Myself, as a VP, I'm being notified via email. Now, all of your existing sales reps, clients, vendors, and suppliers in Sage 300 are automatically made available as subscribers in Sage Alerts and Workflow. You don't have to manually re-enter or even import that data. Alerts and Workflow reads that recipient data dynamically live out of your Sage 300 system. But if we consider this event, sending alerts about invoices coming due, and in fact sending invoices, the 2 most important people that we really need to notify are the customer and the customer's sales rep. And so these last 2 alert recipients are referred to as dynamic recipients because, of course, they're going to change based upon which invoices are coming due. In this event, Alerts and Workflow will automatically send the corresponding
Don, I think we might have lost you there. Can't hear anything. Are you on mute? Sorry about that, folks. Just bear with us for a couple of minutes while we try and get this back online. It looks like Don might have lost his internet connection for a second there. I'm sure he's trying to join back in now, but he's dropped off the Zoom. So couple minutes while he gets back on, and we should be resuming shortly.
actions will have the ability to do so. I'm not quite sure why Zoom meeting just popped up again on my window.
Sorry, Don, we just lost you there for about 4 minutes.
Okay.
So it's popping all back up now, but Yep, there we go, perfect.
All right. Well, I'm not quite sure why that happened, and my apologies, but we were just, I was talking apparently to myself for the last 4 minutes or so about the ability for Sage Alerts and Workflow to trigger updates, to write data back into Sage 300 and other applications. And that's both through, it's through a number of different APIs. And we're about to release our version 10 product later this year, which will add a RESTful web service API to Sage Alerts and Workflow. But when it comes to writing data back into Sage 300 or other applications, Sage Alerts and Workflow has a number of different ways to do so, all which are covered by multiple levels of security. Let me grab myself a quick sip of water. Now, earlier on, I mentioned the ability for Sage Alerts and Workflow to automatically perform trend analysis. And even though I mentioned this back in the PowerPoint, I want to actually show you the event that executes this automated trend analysis. This event is configured to run on the first day of every month at 9 o'clock in the morning. What this event does is it starts out by seeing what each customer purchased for the month just ended. And then Sage Alerts and Workflow goes back 6 months for each customer to figure out what each customer's average monthly purchase amount is based upon that preceding 6 months of activity. And then Sage Alerts and Workflow checks to see if any customer's sales for the month just ended represents a decrease of at least 30%, in which case Sage Alerts and Workflow is going to generate a chart, a line chart that shows that customer's sales, or every customer who has dropped sales more than 30% over the last 6 months. And as we saw earlier, Sage Alerts and Workflow automatically generates an email with the corresponding alert details. I love the idea of a sales rep coming into the office on the first day of the month and having one or more emails waiting for them, telling them about their customers who have changed their buying habits. Okay. Let me jump back into my PowerPoint with a few final slides, which is good because I fear that my voice is going. I want to take a moment just to talk about one particular client by the name of Toyo Inc. They used Sage Alerts and Workflow. They are using Sage Alerts and Workflow to monitor everything within their ERP system. They're sending out order confirmations, invoices, all sorts of alerts about low stock, etc. In fact, 6 months after implementing Toyo Inc., 6 months after implementing Alerts and Workflow, Toyo Inc. came to us and said that they had just passed over 20,000 delivered alert messages. To me, the most telling lines are the last two on this slide. Toyo Inc. calculates a savings of over 100 staff hours every month through the automation of Sage Alerts and Workflow. And they saw an increase in their monthly collections of roughly $11,000. They estimated that Sage Alerts and Workflow was doing the work of 1 to 2 full-time staff members. So, Sage Alerts and Workflow, just to give you an idea of how long it's been performing these duties for companies like Toyo Inc. It's been around for almost 20 years now. It's in use by over 12,000 organizations worldwide. It's developed by my team here, but also sold by Sage Software. And in fact, in the Sage world, it's sold under the name Sage Alerts and Workflow. My team referred to it as Knowledge Sync. It's been the recipient of a number of awards over the years, but you can take all those awards and throw them out and return to just one statistic. And that is that Sage Alerts and Workflow, being used by over 12,000 people, customers worldwide, our support staff handles fewer than 9 incoming support requests a day. Most of our customers we don't hear from but once a year when they renew their annual maintenance and support. It really is a set it and forget it application. And as I mentioned at the very start of my presentation, think about Sage Alerts and Workflow, not just with your Sage 300 application, but with your Sage 300 add-ons, as well as with your other applications, such as a CRM, HR, or help desk application. And by the way, if you currently have generic email accounts such as info or sales@yourorganization.com, and right now it's someone's job to watch over those incoming emails and figure out what to do with them, Sage Alerts and Workflow can also monitor the content of incoming email. It really is an enterprise-wide monitoring and response technology. And so, with my voice barely hanging on, for which I do appreciate your indulgence, let me stop talking and see if anyone has any questions. And Max, I'll also turn to you. I know you've been watching over the question queue. You can let me know if we've received any questions.
Hi, Don. This is Jen with Acumen, and I've been watching over the chat here. I think we appreciate the webinar. Thank you so much for hanging in there. I could hear your voice kind of deteriorating as we go on. So we do have a couple questions, but I think what we'll do is just email out the answers to everyone that attended, if that's okay. And if anyone has any additional questions, you can always contact the Acumen AM team. Our email address is am@acumenfl.com, or you can give us a call at 407-965-2411. Don, we really appreciate you taking the time today to give us an overview of Sage Alerts and Workflow. And again, if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to contact us.
Thanks very much, Jen. And thanks everyone for sticking with me today. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Fantastic. Thank you, Don.